So probably I give you first a few words on energy, how this is all set up, and why energy is engaging in such a topic. Probably a few words on energy before. So energy is in this sense a daughter company of RWE. So formerly it was this big energy company, RWE. Last year it got a little bit split up. So energy was brought to the stock market as well, and is now in this sense independent from RWE. And in energy there's bundled the whole business of energy retail business. Then we have in there the grid operations, so the network business. We have renewables, and on top of that we have as well a little innovation hub. I'm coming from this innovation hub. In the end, the innovation hub is about 120, 140 people. It's divided up in 105 lighthouses. One of them is the machine economy lighthouse. I will come later to that, what we do there or why we do that. And how we set this hub up is in this sense, so we have some outposts as well in Silicon Valley. We are based in London, in Tel Aviv, in Berlin for sure, and in Essen, so where the headquarters is. And the idea is to have really a good relation to this startup scene there in the hubs. And what we are doing, on the one hand side, we are really investing in startups with regard to Series A financing. Then we will as well do seed funding, or even as well do our own ventures, bring them to the market, partly with partners, partly solely alone. And this is running now for 2 years, I guess, and from my perspective, quite successful. So we will see how this all ends up. But so far, it's quite okay. And we are, in this sense, we are not in the area where energy has its core. So it's on the, they call it Horizon 3. So it could be as well in other areas. So it could be in automotive, could be as well in other industries. So that's not a topic. So there have been investments in many areas so far. So the story has to be good, and then they invest. So why machine economy now? So in the end, this started 2 years ago, I guess, or 2.5 years. Probably most of you know Carsten Stöcker, who looked into the topic. In the end, so we have this mega trends on, for example, blockchain. Yeah. So we have the whole topic of decentralization of systems, like the energy system, which is currently in a big step towards decentralization with all these solar panels and so on. We have this topics of sharing economy, so peer-to-peer car sharing as one example. We have the whole AI topic. We have this promise that sensor data will rise tremendously in next years. And then for sure we have this whole machine-to-machine communication. And if you think about that, then you come probably to the point, okay, what we probably need or what will probably emerge is something like a machine economy, because sensors, if you could imagine, if you go to a smart home or whatever, then your refrigerator is probably talking, I don't know, to another device, and then you come to the point that if then they start to interact between each other, for sure you come something to a machine economy, as well as cars, probably they interact or they communicate. If you think about autonomous driving and so on. And our belief, or strong belief, is that in several areas probably we will see the emergence of decentralized platforms for that. And this is one reason why we, from the first step onwards, we took into consideration the whole blockchain topic and the whole topic of IoT devices and so on. So, what have we done so far with regard to the blockchain area? So in our lighthouse, just a quick view on that. So we started, which is for sure a little bit due to the fact that we are an energy company. We started with peer-to-peer energy trading. This is a company called Conjoule, which has been brought to market just a few weeks ago. This is now as well a joint venture with one other major energy company. And then we as well did a project to bring peer-to-peer charging on the market, which means that you have an app and can peer-to-peer charge via blockchain technology your electric car with a charging pole. It was one other project. Based on that, MoveX developed or is currently developing, where it's more the idea, so based on the peer-to-peer energy charging topic, to develop that to a platform where we have peer-to-peer services in the automotive industry. So as well with regard to peer-to-peer car sharing, for example. So that's one idea. This currently settled up. Then we invested or jointly set up Xsettle, which is more in the blockchain area, a company which serves with regard to payment services. Then another topic was with regard to 3D printing, where as well there was a vision of how would it be if we have, in this sense, decentralized manufacturing with regard to 3D printing. So this idea is to have secure the 3D file and then securely transmit it to a factory, 3D factory, just print it out, so no possibility to get to the 3D file, as well with the help of the blockchain to make it short. And in this context, we as well digged into the topic of digital twin, because we said, okay, if we produce a certain 3D part, then it would make sense as well to store something like a history of that part, so production parameter and so on. And based on that, we started more or less end of last year, beginning of that year, the Twin of Things project, where we'll now a little bit dig into the project with you, where we are there and what we are aiming for. So it's all about, in this sense, that we set up an open platform, an ecosystem that captures the data, the digital twin of all objects. So in the end it means, so if you imagine, I don't know, such a PC or another object, could be as well something like here, a bottle or whatever, you could imagine that you have something digital as well, somewhere on the blockchain or somewhere, something digital which you can then put data on. So you could imagine that, I don't know, as we have pictured here with some shoes or whatever, you could do it with machines probably, which as well have already sensor devices. You could as well do it with autonomous cars. You could do it probably with regard to health records of humans, or as well with regard to other organisms where you say, okay, this is the history of a cow or whatever, there's meat from. So this is the whole idea behind, so to give an object a digital story. So that's the idea from a high-level perspective. So what are the problems you probably currently encounter with regard to real objects? Yeah. So for sure you have problems with regard to fake products across the world, probably, especially probably in the Asian markets. You as well have probably, with regard to security, you probably have tampered data. You have probably as well problems if you think about all the sensor data, that the data is really securely transmitted to another, to a system or to another device. You have as well probably big problems with regard to interoperability of systems. So if you think about this emerging technology with all these sensors sending data to somewhere, and if you think about collaboration between companies, so you for sure have interoperability problems. Then for sure this whole new idea of decentral data storage or digital twin, which is decentrally set up, delivers as well some opportunities with regard to, you probably have new digital experience with regard to that you have for an individual object, you now have the possibility to really see where it came from, how it was produced, what are probably spare parts, and all this story you could imagine. So really down to the individual object. That is probably in parts not possible today. And then you can probably as well imagine probably a little bit further about some topics where you can say, okay, if I know that here's a certain object, then I could probably as well send certain messages to that object or via smartphone corresponding to that object, and having as well some topics with regard to marketing and so on. So it's a whole universe of opportunities from my perspective. So we started with that, and probably this was a showcase we did in the hackathon together with BitchainDB. This was more in the fashion area, where the idea was, okay, if you have now clothes, you can probably text that somehow. We did that there in this POC. We did it with a crypto ship, so it was tagged with a ship. Then we had on the ship public and private ID. and then according to the public ID in this sense, this went onto BigchainDB, and then have there been some data allocated for this garment here. So that's the whole idea. And then you have a Nidalized front end. You can probably scan then the tag, and then you get the information out of the BigchainDB database. So in the end, what is it all about currently? So the most easiest way to setting up a digital twin is somehow to have something like a tagging solution. Yeah, it could be, for example, this is one of our partners, Riddle & Code. This is a crypto chip in this sense, so where you can have a public-private key on that, and then you can as well have the possibility to really sign data transactions with that. Or we have another partner, ScanTrust, who developed something like an intelligent QR code, which allows you as well to have a single QR code in this sense. So really down to the one ID. Yeah, so you put it on an object, and then you have the reference on that. Okay, this is a single ID, and with regard to the single ID, you can then bring information to the blockchain. Yeah. So we have, in this sense, we have this whole idea or whole topic of how can I tag something. So this as well strongly depends on the use case you have. Yeah. So if you have more probably fast-moving consumer goods, you probably take something like that because it's quite inexpensive. Or if you have more valuable goods, or you have probably some investment goods or machines or whatever, you could as well afford to have a really crypto chip, or you have as well some computing power in that, and you can probably as well use certain software which is as well on the market to give an object an individual ID. And then how we like that, or how we do that currently, is with BigchainDB. So then we have the possibility to set up something with BigchainDB and to allocate to that individual ID certain information of the objects to that. And then we can have topics like verification of authenticity and provenance. We can have proof of ownership. We can have a lifecycle traceability and so on. And that we are not just having on slides. We are really doing that. I will show you a little bit later. So this is one proof of concept we are currently developing. This is the easy idea to bring to a broader audience in this sense. The idea of, okay, blockchain, probably you all know that, but if you go to other business areas, I just had to talk to the association of the leasing companies in Germany, they're the CFOs. For sure they have heard about Bitcoin probably and blockchain, but they have no clue about what it's all about. So they say it's Bitcoin, and it's not, it's criminal and so on. So that's the basic perception. The idea behind that is just to say, okay, what we develop is here a little nice app based on Android. Then we will have as well, as you have seen here, something like a crypto chip, which is NFC ready. And then the idea behind that is that we can just have something like a starter pack. Yeah, so you would engage with regard to blockchain. Yeah, then you get your tech. You can put it on an object. Then you can file certain information on that. You can probably take a photo. Then, in this sense, save it, and then if you 2 days later or whatever, you can again scan the object and get the data back. So quite easy, so not really sophisticated, but as well as this access that they understand that you can build in this sense, quite usual applications with the technology. Yeah. That's the basic idea behind that. Then we have another topic. We can as well. I can show you the live system as well. So what we developed as well together with BigchainDB in hackathon in the first version, where we, in this sense, more had the technical feasibility that we can bring from a central backend where telemetry data is captured, data to BigchainDB, and this is now a second version of the POC in this sense, where we have a little bit business logic in, and the basic idea is that we, in this sense here, take from a central system, from a central web service, we get data from individual cars and put some telemetry data, so kilometer data, trip data, street and so on. We grab and put it as well in our system. And the idea behind is that then we could have something like a real valid proof that, for example, the odometer status is really in the right way. It was not tampered in between. So if you think about you have a car for 3 years or whatever, or you buy sold a used car, you could imagine, okay, it would be good if I have somehow a proof that the kilometer status is fine. And currently there's no really system in the market. The only systems I know is if you go to a garage and you have somehow to capture the kilometer status. But in the end, so there's not a broad application for that. So that's just an idea. So we're doing this as well with talks with 2 bigger OEMs from Germany who are as well interested. On the one hand side, for sure, with regard to the blockchain topic, how to deal with that, what possibilities do we have with that, and as well with regard to the content. So it's just in a flow. I can just show it to you. So this is now the live system. Just log in here. So you see, we have a short menu here. We have some roles here. They have all their public key in this sense. We have here some cars. One is real, so one is really connected to the backend system. One is a little bit fake. So here we have then some details page where you just see, okay, here's the vehicle number and so on. And this is then, in this sense, oops. And here, for example, you see then the total mileage, which is now really real data from the cloud system where we get the data from via an API. And then you have as well the possibility, in this sense, to look onto some trips. So it's probably from a technology perspective, no big deal. But from my perspective, it's a good showcase for people who are not so engaged in blockchain. And then you can see, okay, we have here now trips. So you see where the car has been driven. And you can as well, it's a gimmick. We have as well the possibility to show it on a map. And so, oops. And then we have as well much data here in. Sorry for that. So nothing special, but it works in this sense. We have, we can here create new users in the admin view. We can see all cars. We can register cars, and we can as well transfer cars. So not everything is ready currently, but we will most likely develop it to the end in the next weeks, and then use it at the showcase. If we have talks to other companies, and as well discuss with the OEMs how we proceed with that. So if they say, okay, we, in this sense, define a really product with them together, and then develop that and bring that to the market. So that's in discussion. Okay, so how does it on a really high level works? As I mentioned, so for sure you have to have somehow a tagging solution. So you have to have your individual ID. Then you, in this sense, send and receive data. So you put it to our digital twin platform. So to our platform we would like to set up, and then you put it in this sense to BigchainDB. And in the end, you can then via a dashboard or some enterprise apps or via an app on your mobile, you can get the data or as well fill data in. So that's the basic idea. So, and where can you probably use that technology? There I see really many applications in quite a few areas. What is here a little bit darker in gray are the areas where we are currently discussing this with some other business areas. So in logistics, we are currently discussing with regard to a solution. We are thinking about to set up an audit trail in in the logistics of cool containers. So here's the idea that we have an auditable trail of temperature curves in this sense. So that is one topic. With regard to fashion luxury, we have discussion with regard to counterfeit, so that we as well place a crypto chip in the container for a certain very expensive cream, which develops quite well. With regard to consumer goods, we are more in a discussion on tagging with regard to this intelligent QR code, I would name it, as I just introduced that to you. With regard to production as well, we are engaged here with a company who's in more in the steel business, who's thinking to set up something with us. We had just our car pass, which is more in the automotive sector, and for sure we have currently some discussions with our business itself. So, for example, for wind farms, they are as well thinking about putting. So, in this sense, you have to know in a wind park there are tons of data or sensor data gathered currently. They are as well thinking about bringing that as well to a decentral system, as well to have an audit trail for that. In the sense of you have to know that usually 5 years these systems or these wind parks are maintained by the producer, and then it comes to the point where you take it over. And if you have some claims, you have to prove in this sense how the sensor data have been, and that they could not have been tampered, all this stuff. So quite interesting. So I see many potentials. For sure we are a little bit in the early stage, for sure, but I guess it will develop for sure. So just a few, on market size probably you can skip that. So it's tremendous in this sense. So if you really start to think about that, you give a certain amount of objects wherever they lie, if it's fashion or if it's cars or whatever, you just have big numbers, and then you can probably build on top of that really good business models as well. Here probably now a little bit more technical view. On the high-level architecture, we are currently developing together with BigchainDB. So this is this open platform we would like to develop, where we have, in this sense, underneath some basic services. So on the one hand side, for file system, we are currently using IPFS. Then we have for the data storage, we have BigchainDB as our ground layer. And here we have more or less some tagging solutions. So we are, for example, currently setting up a pilot with Iota as well, together with BigchainDB, and would like to use Iota, a thin node of that, as well to give, in this sense, a car a real unique ID, and as well to sign then the telematics data with regard or with the help of Iota. The code I just named with regard to those crypto chips they bring to the market. And CryptoWork is another service which, in this sense, how to say that, so they bundle transactions, hash them, or take transactions, hash them individually, and then they make something like an anchor hash around that, and then they place that to a usual blockchain like Bitcoin or Ethereum. And then they have a mechanism that you can quite easily verify the individual transaction, although you have only put this anchor hash onto the blockchain. So that's a patent they have for that. Quite interesting, and we are as well piloting that. So that means, in the end, we are looking as well currently for new partners with regard to tag somehow or to bring this ID to an object. So it's probably not a closed list in this sense. So if you know an interesting technology which emerged and which probably fits to that view a little bit, let me know. So we are interested in screening the market here for sure. Probably the last point, and if you have here questions as well, Dimi can probably a little bit help me with questions. So in the end, what this open platform should have, which we together develop, it should help in the end the community to easily set up something like an object or like an object or an asset. Then it should as well help to write data into an asset or into an object. It should as well help to prove data authenticity. And we would like to support as many object classes as possible in this sense. Our idea is that each identity then has usually blockchain and private and a public key in this sense. Storage of data, so this metadata will be done in BigchainDB. And then we as well set up a system where we can have then the permissions for the system or for interacting with the data and so on. We will as well have access rights and all the stuff which we partly already realized in the CAPAs. And then transactions for sure are that as well signed with a private key. So that's it from a technology perspective, and that's as well the end of the presentation here. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Questions?
Is this open platform publicly available?
Not yet, but it will. So the idea is that it will be publicly available, yeah. So the idea is because if I think about, if I go back to here, if you just go there, there's so many companies in the world which could probably use such technology, or other companies which could help other companies to use it. So it's, from our perspective, it's clear that it has to be an open platform which can as well be used by third parties. Yeah.
If I may, a slightly more pragmatic question. I think we all know how decentralized architecture would benefit all these industries massively. But when it comes to actually implementing these stamps or crypto chips or whatever you're planning to do, how are you going to do that across products? How are you going to stamp a diamond?
Probably not a diamond. Yeah, probably this is not as well known. It's already done, I guess, with regard to the diamond. We see basic characteristics the diamond has. So in this sense, this is the fingerprint of a diamond. It's the diamond itself, in this sense. From my perspective, it depends really on the use case. So it's then a discussion with a potential customer or with a potential company which would like to use that. It could be in the easiest way. It could be a simple QR code on the one hand side, or it could be a more or less complex crypto chip or another software component which in this sense implements a public-private key into an existing system. So it depends, but from a technology perspective, this is all available from my view, but it depends on the use case. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How are you planning to build in privacy into, say, like the telemetry example of the car?
Yeah.
Like thinking about user privacy.
Yeah, sure. So what we did in our example is, or what we had in mind is that certain information, for example, for telemetry data are in this sense open. So it should be probably if you as well have change of ownership, for example, for a car. Yeah, for sure the mileage data in this sense, how it probably developed for each day should be seeable. Yeah, should be okay, should be public. But for sure, if I now own the car and as well see my trips, this should be probably not seeable for the next owner of the car. So we for sure will have in such systems, in this sense, permissions, which will be set up so that we have, in this sense, public information and as well private information or private data in this sense. So, but this depends as well on the use case. Yeah. And what you capture. So if you just, for example, capture operating hours of a machine or whatever, that's probably uncritical. It could be even public, yeah. Why not knowing that a certain machine has run, 10,000 hours? It's probably not critical. So it depends then for sure on the data you store.
I think also to add to that, I think for blockchains, what we currently see is 3 different layers of privacy inside the transaction itself. So there is the privacy of who transacts with whom. There is the privacy of how much has been transacted in one transaction. And then there is the privacy of the data payload itself. So a couple of projects have already implemented partial solutions, solutions on one of those levels. And at BigchainDB, for example, we're also developing a solution for encrypting the assets payload in the transaction itself. So this could be used for the car use case where you would commit your data to a public ledger or a permission ledger, public ledger or private ledger, I don't know. And then you would encrypt it up front and only you would be able to see it. And you would be able to, you can then, there's different kind of modes you can play this, right? You can also encrypt it towards someone else's public key and then they would be able to see it. So you have options to share as well.
Yeah.
How are you thinking about the storage of the private keys for an individual? So in your app where I'm taking a picture and I'm storing information, I'm signing for my private key, how are you thinking about, what if I lose the phone? Or where is that, backup to that? Or how would you explain to somebody who doesn't get what even what a private key is? The importance of it, right? Like my grandmother, for instance, if she had an app and she was using it.
Yeah, the question is if now the app has, so if you're using an app, so in our example, the app itself would have not a public or private key, it goes for the object, so the object has it. So yeah, for sure, so if you have an object which is tagged and there's a public-private key and you lose the object, you forget about it. So you probably are not able to get the data, which is, for example, in BigchainDB, you cannot read it any longer because the requirement for that is that you first, with an app, scan the object. Yeah. So via NFC, get the ID out of that, and then the ID is referenced back to BigchainDB, and the data is gotten there. It's good. Yeah. This could be. Yeah, for sure. But yeah.
Can I add
Yeah. Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Real quick, more in general as well. It looks like you're working on a bunch of different things here. I'm just curious of some theories.
So there's mnemonic devices where you basically try to remember something, and from that you create a private key, a public key pair. But there is also, like, imagine you forget your memory and stuff like that. There's interesting designs if you look at systems like Uport, where you basically have a recovery mechanism based on your community. Imagine you lose your phone and you can ask like 9 people of your trust factor to please cast a vote to this contract or whatever. And if I gather 9, then it's clear that I just lost my phone and I reissue my private key. So there's a thing of how to remember it, where to store it, and there's also the fact that you do want to have some recovery mechanisms. So these things are currently like in different apps, different development, but I think it would be nice to have some standardization across this.
Yeah, I was thinking about like biometrics, right? If you read you could have like your iRed and your thumbprint. And
probably,
probably
also some hard pulse.
Maybe.
Sure.
Yeah.
How are you using IPFS? Is it the web content, or is that?
It's for so in this example we are using IPFS for the, if you take a picture and then you would like to store it, then you use IPFS for that. Yeah.
This app is entirely decentralized, or is it using a central server as well?
Let me see this here.
Because your diagram about the car is like, I don't really see the blockchain in there, I just see a software service. So I don't understand what is the actual benefit for me as the end user, having a blockchain enabled, whatever, car tools tracking system.
I think there's many questions in that one question.
Yeah.
It's purely decentralized in the sense that all the data is from a decentralized store, and the web app is just consuming that. With the right user credentials, you can retrieve specific portions of the data because the users own and control the data. That's the blockchain aspect. Also, the other blockchain aspect is the fact that you have full audit trails of governance, whatever happened to the car before, so you never forget something, you only append. There is one little thing that I still find myself too much centralized with, is basically there is a little service fetching data from an API to push it inside of the car. Actually, we'd rather have IoT devices with private keys internally so that they can sign off on the data and push that towards a service as being like a regular client to a blockchain. So in that sense, that part of the data intake is not fully decentralized yet. That kind of clears your question. You can ask after that.
So
Yeah.
is the idea that the user would sell their data to an insurance company, or?
Well, you have the option.
Okay.
At least you know what's happening with your data.
So that's the question of the business model behind. Yeah. So this is more what we did here is more technical feasibility in this sense, and what services or what ideas you can put on top of that. That's another question. Yeah, for sure. If we, for example, imagine that we have a service where you put somehow on an open ledger your driving behavior, for sure, the insurance company could offer other rates to you if you are willing to share that information. Yeah, sure. Could be possible, as it is today already with centralized systems as well. So you could go to an insurance company and say, okay, give me a telematics device, I put it on the CAN bus in my car, and then you get the data and you can watch my driving behavior. And if I
Forced by law.
Or you're forced by law, and if you keep it in certain limits, you get a better rate, yeah.
And for this, I think the straightforward use case is odometer fraud. Odometer fraud, when people, if they want to sell a car, they turn back the mileage, or import, export, all these things, and there's a cross-boundary, and it's difficult to, typically you have multiple sources of truth saying different things, and really try to reconcile one object that lives on a data substrate.
How do you attach it to the car?
Well, in this case, we use the TomTom device.
Okay.
But that's why they're talking with the car manufacturers.
So this is, So it's clear. So from my perspective, nearly everyone at least started or has already central system, where they capture telematics data. And there's as well a political debate on that. Who's the data owner for that? Yeah, is it the OEM, is it the car manufacturer, or should it not be the car holder? And who gives what rights to that for that data? So if it's okay that I know BMW or whoever captures the data, I guess how did they do it? So you say you are willing. You have to sign that off in this sense. But for sure, that's a whole debate you have then. Yeah.
But at this point in time, I think most cars send data to the OEM already.
Yeah, but not sure. I guess partly you have to, in this sense, you have to sign that it's okay. So if you get your car and you start your system, I do not know. 200%.
Have you read the terms and conditions?
Probably in the terms and conditions.
Car starts the first time you need to make a checkbox.
Probably.
We had one more question.
What happens if you can't scan an item anymore, or if the chip breaks down? Can you still transfer ownership?
Good question.
I think there would probably be different recovery mechanisms, right? I mean, one of them is, as Dimi already said, you kind of have a recovery mechanism around the private key, such that when you lose the chip, you lose the private key, but you can put in a new one and orchestrate that. So you can do that with something like UPort. You can even do it with something as simple as multi-signatures, where you give or threshold conditions where you give the keys to someone you trust or that has an interest that the car still works after the chip breaks. I don't know who that is, but
yeah, there's complex keys, and typically this falls under a term called identity provisioning, switching identity. Basically, you could say that asset looks locked, but there are ways to. If you would roll this out in a production system, you probably would have every fallback scenario covered, or try to do that.
Okay, I was just thinking about the case when someone offers me like luxury sneakers and just say, the chip broke down, and I can buy them anyway.
Then you have a major discount. No?
Okay, one last question. And
you said you sometimes fall back to a QR code. What are the use cases left in that scenario? Because that's easily copied in contrast to the crypto chip, right?
Yeah, sure. So from my perspective, it depends on the use case here. Yeah. So if it depends on what appetite you have to put in a tagging solution which is sophisticated or not. So if you really have fast-moving consumer goods, and you would probably not. I could imagine scenarios where you just say, okay, QR code is enough, and you really probably have for 10,000 products. We have the same QR code. So we know it's something like we have not a digital twin for every object, but for a batch, for example, and that's probably sufficient. So it depends on your appetite, how you would like to have that.
And I also want to add, there is a difference between knowing something for sure or putting a claim on a blockchain that's tied to identity or reputation. And if somebody scans a barcode and it says, I saw this at this point in time, it's not the absolute truth. It's just a claim made by the identity about an object.